How do you think Nintendo will use AI in development, design, and gameplay? As soon as I saw this question in the comments of one of my recent videos, I knew this deserved a full video and would take some time to research and unpick. Some of the answers I discovered actually were quite surprising. This is a major topic. Firstly, we'll consider Nintendo's unique perspective on artificial intelligence, their past statements, and track record in this field. Is this even something they will be looking to exploit? And why might they go in a very different direction? Then we'll talk about what we actually mean by AI, as it has lots of different meanings and has been used in the gaming space for some years, meaning slightly different things. Next, we'll look at the impact of AI at a hardware level. What are the advantages and even disadvantages of this kind of tech? Then finally, we'll move on to looking at game design and gameplay options and how AI could take Nintendo forward. So let's start by considering what exactly we mean by artificial intelligence. Games have long had some form of artificial intelligence. Without it, enemies would be pretty uninteresting. Looking back through developer interviews, it's striking though how little even this rudimentary AI has been a topic of discussion. Iwata Asks contains 3 separate interviews where the topic of artificial intelligence is addressed briefly, and all 3 are with third-party developers. Trawling back further, I came across an interview with Mario Kart 64 director Hideki Kono discussing how enemy AI improved, and there was some discussion around improving AI in Mario 128. It's not that this wasn't of interest to Nintendo for their games, but clearly it wasn't something they considered worth focusing on in developer interviews. However, what we're really dealing with now is generative AI, AI that can produce content, including creative content, in the same manner that humans can. This includes, of course, the use of deep learning supersampling or DLSS to improve the resolution of games that in some cases have already been created. Nintendo's chip suppliers Nvidia are running towards AI rather than away from it. They signed a deal with Johnson & Johnson in March 2024 to develop new applications for generative AI to be used in surgery, with Microsoft and GE Healthcare to work on medical imaging, and it seems that the company is going from strength to strength. A recent BBC article reports that Nvidia said that major customers including Amazon, Google, Microsoft and OpenAI are expected to use the firm's new flagship chip in cloud computing services and for their own AI offerings. It also said that the new software tools called microservices improve system efficiency to make it easier for a business to incorporate an AI model into its work. Other announcements include a new line of chips for cars which can run chatbots inside the vehicle. The company said Chinese electric vehicle makers BYD and XPeng would both use its new chips. Mr. Huang also outlined a new series of chips for creating humanoid robots, inviting several of the robots to join him on stage. From a technical standpoint alone, Nintendo stands to benefit hugely from this. For nearly 2 decades, they have trailed the competition. If AI can allow them to take games that are computationally weaker and bring them even a little closer to modern specs, and moreover, if they can allow third parties to more readily transpose their titles onto Nintendo's hardware, Nintendo could keep competitive with other companies even during a relatively long hardware cycle like the Switch's. The government of Japan is full square behind AI. Not only is it collaborating with others, chairing the G7 Hiroshima Summit in May 2023 to produce the strategy it called the Hiroshima AI Process, but the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry this year launched a Generative AI Accelerator Challenge, a project aimed to provide support to companies in providing resources for AI to be used effectively and to help the country become more competitive. In a country with a disproportionately aging population, the potential for AI to paper over cracks of a waning workforce is huge. But let's now centre ourselves in the heads of the core staff at Nintendo, a company that exemplifies the Kyoto tradition of craftsmanship, with their top talent often working for years and frequently decades in the same department, often on the same franchises, as the masters at the top slowly pass down the wisdom. How exactly does the centuries-long philosophy of Kyoto craftsmanship, a philosophy that bleeds through the pores of the denizens of Japan's ancient capital, adapt to an era that takes the opposite approach, where instead of one individual learning and evolving gradually, a program learns en masse from potentially millions of different sources? However, whatever the Japanese governmental view on copyright infringement is, Nintendo as a company that likely has a different view. And if these sources include other people's intellectual property, or even Nintendo's own intellectual property, you can imagine that they would not be jumping with joy at the prospect of incorporating AI into their workflow. Whatever the Japanese governmental view of copyright infringement may be, Nintendo as a company likely has a different view. For one thing, just logistically, they are in business now with many multinational entities, not least Universal Pictures, who have a very strong vested interest in protecting their own IP from copyright sharks. Secondly, they themselves have been the victim of copyright infringements and have moved very aggressively to protect their assets, as recent anti-piracy moves, particularly in the emulation space, have shown. More than most companies, Nintendo is especially vulnerable to piracy because they are running highly popular software that they are essentially gatekeeping behind bespoke hardware. This makes emulation and theft a direct threat to them. Even beyond games, the recent furore over Palworld shows the risk that artificial intelligence might, in a way that is legally passable but morally dubious, lift and recycle Nintendo's own creations into something that is ostensibly new but scratches the same itch. Imitation has always been the sincerest form of flattery, and some of the very best games in the world start out this way. Where would the world be without the wondrous Undertale, even if it was conceived as a direct response to Earthbound? But humans taking what they love about a game and recreating it as an expression and a tribute is very different from algorithmically sampling aspects of a title and regurgitating them as a new product. From a creative point of view, I have seen it stated that Japan is not enormously sympathetic to the potential copyright claims and is quite lax about copyright law, but as a member of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and with its own intellectual property high court based only 10 minutes from Nintendo's Tokyo offices, the country has the infrastructure and the impetus to navigate these waters. After all, generative AI needs to be trained on materials, and if those materials are copyrighted work, what emerges can be perilously close to copyright infringement. So Nintendo are likely to resist and lead the way in resisting anything that can use generative AI to infringe their intellectual property. After all, as Time magazine put it in 2019, ostensibly a video game company, Nintendo is really an intellectual property company converting people's seemingly endless love of its characters into profit. And defending intellectual property could become even more tricky in an AI era. But Nintendo can't turn back the tide. In 2009, at an investor Q&A, Nintendo's senior figures gave quite a long and complex meditation on technology, in particular to the then significant issue of whether to move from standard to high definition. Shigeru Miyamoto discussed the emergence of new technology. As long as my way of making games are concerned, all I am concerned about technologies is we probably cannot swim against the tide. The customer's taste will become more and more refined. Even today, many customers who have seen HD once say they cannot go back to SD. On the other hand, quite a few of us are accepting 5.1 channel even though they are not true 5.1 channel, or embracing HD even though they are not true HD. In other words, when the majority of people around us say it's okay, we are content with the situation. Basically, Nintendo may not lead the pack, but it will, eventually, follow it. However, the most insightful and considered reflection on Nintendo's technological strategy came, as you might expect, from Satoru Iwata. To put it rather simply, he said, there are two types of computer programs. One is a program that the programmers wonder why a person is going through this trouble when this sort of thing can and or should have been done by a computer. Another type is a program which naturally makes us feel that it is the programmer's job, not the PC's, to make them. When we say we were able to design good hardware, it is the hardware which gives the least amount of trouble to the programmers in order to make the required applications. Of course, there is the opposite case. I hate to tell this as Mr. Takeda is sitting next to me today, but in the days of Nintendo 64, we were not able to make the program run properly without making a lot of extra and seemingly unnecessary efforts. However, Nintendo GameCube and Wii are made so that programmers do not have to beat our brains out or making extra works, so I feel that the programming has become fairly easy. Mr. Takeda himself has learned from Nintendo 64 and has been specifically focused on how possibly the hardware people can make the platform, which gives the least amount of hardship to software engineers. I would like to believe he will keep this spirit for any future products. So look, fundamentally this is the dream, to be able to have developers create what they want to create without making barriers to entry too high. If AI-assisted programming, AI-assisted testing, AI-assisted graphical processing and sound engineering can expedite the process of game creation and allow them to focus not on beating their brains out, but on the effort that is truly productive, then so much the better. But in this description, it's very much the first type of programmer he identifies that they seem to be focused on. The ones where you wonder why this wasn't done by a computer, i.e., why is the development environment so complicated that humans are having to make up for that complexity to develop the games. They're not talking about the second type, where it seems like it should be the job of a programmer, because according to this point of view, simply making the programming environment as easy as possible is sufficient to allow programmers to take on the creative reins themselves. But if we were expecting Nintendo to be utilising artificial intelligence in a major way, surely we would expect to see it in their recruitment. Nintendo Systems is the new company Nintendo has started with DNA to, in its own words, strengthen the digitization of Nintendo's business. I've deep dived Nintendo Systems in a separate video linked to the top, but while reviewing not just its current recruitment hires, but the recruitment hires over the last year or so since it was founded, it's clear that they are looking for a very diverse set of skills amongst their hires. E-commerce server development, cloud center of excellence personnel, web browser development, game development engineers, server security engineers, project managers for game tournaments, but one thing that seems absent is anything to do with generative AI, neural networks, or upscaling. Same with Nintendo's core career pages. In September 2023, one machine learning job was posted, but this was very much against the tide of their interests. There is some reference to what I suppose you would call AI-adjacent technologies, such as deep learning, in their annual reports. Their standard blurb goes as follows: "We carry out research and development activities to examine the applicability of various technologies, including interfaces such as touch panels and sensors, wireless communication, network security, cloud computing, virtual reality, deep learning and big data analysis to the field of home entertainment. Our efforts are not limited to in-house studies and research, in that we are also exploring various possibilities on a daily basis to discover technologies that will help create new ways to play by proactively turning our attention outside Nintendo. Moreover, we continue to enhance the durability, safety, quality, and performance of our products to ensure that consumers can comfortably enjoy them over an extended period, as well as design and develop various accessories and pursue cost-cutting and energy conservation initiatives." Of course, even if it's only for cost-cutting and energy conservation, AI is likely to provide some benefits. Still, AI does not get a specific mention in this list. Nintendo just doesn't seem hugely compelled to make this a strategic focus. That's not to say they won't benefit from it. For one thing, the development environment will change as the tools available to the company become AI enhanced. Even if Nintendo develops everything in-house, just using third-party spreadsheet and word processing programs which use AI, let alone more advanced coding tools which are AI infused, will naturally aid production. For another and more noticeable reason why Nintendo will benefit from AI, Nvidia are as all in on AI as it's possible to be, and this has the inevitable consequence for Nintendo's development pipeline. Also, it's clear that Sony are looking to utilise this kind of technology with the PlayStation 5 Pro, rumoured to include its own upscaling tech called Spectral Super Resolution. The tide is coming in, and as Shigeru Miyamoto has stated, Nintendo will not swim against it. Similarly, the ability of AI to save time might seem fair enough. Nintendo already shares assets from sound staff and sometimes shares art staff across its games, but if it could take, say, a plant designed for Metroid Prime and use some kind of processing to turn it into something better fitting an Animal Crossing game, and then do the same thing again to make it fit a Mario title, this seems like a sensible sweating of their assets rather than some deep betrayal of their core principles. I don't for a second think that any of their many art staff have anything to worry about, but given the scale of some of these titles, if they can bring down the development windows from 10 years to close to 6 or 7, everybody stands to benefit. But graphical frippery and time-saving applications are one thing, squarely falling into Satoru Iwata's mandate to make things easier for developers. What about the broader opportunities for game design? Here, we inevitably must become more speculative and rely on what we know about Nintendo's approaches to developing games. 1. We know they always look to surprise and delight. a lot of creativity is putting together existing ideas in unexpected ways. Not one screen, but two screens, a remote control as a controller, buttons on the controller's shoulders. If AI can expedite this process and increase the amount of ideas present, so much the better. Early in its development, the Super Mario Bros. Wonder team cultivated 2,000 sticky notes with ideas, and yet AI is capable of generating thousands in the space of seconds. They won't all be good, of course, in fact, most of them definitely won't be, but that's where developers can start to filter out ideas. Nevertheless, the potential to find combinations outside of what we would normally expect presents new avenues for surprise. There is also a real possibility to disrupt the inexorable trend towards what I'm going to refer to as scale creep. You can see this most dramatically illustrated with the wait times for 3D Zeldas. Majora's Mask was released at lightning speed and Wind Waker was rushed to market perhaps a little too soon, given the content that sadly needed to be cut. But since then, Twilight Princess was a 4-year wait, Skyward Sword 5 years, Breath of the Wild 5 years and 4 months, and Tears of the Kingdom a stonking 6 years and 2 months. Yes, this is significantly due to perfectionism, and I would never want, and nor would I expect, Nintendo to rush a game to market or to scale down their ambitions for the sake of getting it out the door. But think about the pinch points in the development of both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. By all accounts, the Breath of the Wild map was created relatively quickly, and the depths of Tears of the Kingdom were created even quicker by inverting the game map and fleshing it out, mainly with tougher challenges. What took the time was the development of the chemistry engine and then the physics engine to allow the ultra hand mechanics to function properly. This is where AI could really aid development, with the ability to parse code and spot inconsistencies, and indeed to scale out existing code to different circumstances. The current trend towards ever longer dev cycles does not seem to have particularly helped the likes of Sony and Microsoft. Now, Nintendo can't completely turn away from long development cycles. There was a reason that Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey were so beloved. The combination of Nintendo's creative sensibilities with a huge sense of scale offered by modern games is a potent mix. This is where artificial intelligence tools can help. Look at Hidemaru Fujibashi's approach to the recent Zelda games, what he calls multiplicative gameplay. The sense of exploration and freedom the games engender is caused by having a relatively fixed number of well-developed and tightly conceived mechanics that can interact with each other in innumerable ways, multiplying out the possibilities. But to test and combine all these is very tricky for any team of humans, and this is where artificial intelligence programs could come in. More plausible also are testing technologies that may identify ideal paths through levels and help developers steer players towards them, cutting down on frustrations and snags that might stop players from continuing. Nintendo has already played around with different intensities of tutorial modes, from full-on hand-holding as by Hector's U as the next step you need to take, to Breath of the Wild's figure it out in your own philosophy. However, in other games the ability to scale difficulty up and down is more graduated. In Mario vs Donkey Kong, you can pop back and forth between difficulty settings at will, while Super Mario 3D Land would have assistive power-ups appearing after a certain number of failures, using AI to more precisely identify the kinds of places that people are going wrong and to adapt could be useful. If someone is struggling to clear a ledge, perhaps the game should subtly widen the ledge as the player is playing. This is tricky, of course, as for many of the most dedicated gamers it would fly right against the integrity of the challenge a game presents, but as an additional mode, a kind of assistive difficulty of the sort we've seen with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it could be very helpful in keeping people challenged but not frustrated. One thing I don't expect to see much of is procedural generation. Despite the success of so many games from Minecraft to Hades in using procedurally generated content, Nintendo has generally refrained from partaking, although it's true to say that the new Splatoon 3 DLC does appear to use procedural generation fairly heavily. That said, this is from one of Nintendo's youngest development teams, and while I'm sure wise commenters will tell me times they've used procedural generations elsewhere, I'm struggling to think of many examples. Surrendering the tools to craft the player experience is, in general, very un-Nintendo. Also, many companies will be looking into natural language processing to allow more immersive game worlds to take shape. It seems difficult to imagine, though, that Nintendo will, anytime soon at least, want to emulate this. Even their most open franchises don't seem particularly grounded in this approach. Zelda's worlds aren't all that densely populated even before the Calamity-era games, while Xenoblade Chronicles games are beloved for their tight story, which doesn't seem to click well with swarms of artificially intelligent NPCs. It's all about craft. Satoru Iwata was quoted as saying that Nintendo are a company of Kyoto craftsmen. I think the reason Nintendo seems to be completely comfortable with AI innovations via Nvidia, but shows scant interest in moving towards these technologies from a development perspective, is that at heart they feel that most development decisions need to be made by programmers, by craftspeople. And they may well be right. Look, AI can be incredibly powerful, and the example of Palworld shows that it can be effective in finding things that scratch an itch, but the time will come that people will hanker for authenticity, for something that they can trust has been created by human ingenuity, and this is where Nintendo can stand firm. AI-assisted development, AI-assisted testing, or even AI-assisted play tools can provide something really positive. It would be great to imagine that AI could open accessibility tools to new players, especially correcting oversights, retrospectively adding more detailed textures to help colorblind players. But when it comes to the artistry of creating games, I think it will be a very long time before artificial intelligence really comes to the forefront. My video linked here on Nintendo Systems delves more into Nintendo's tech background, and there are some other playlists on screen for you to check out. Thank you as ever for watching, and I will see you soon for another Nintendo Forecast.